All right, guys, let's dive in. Let's look at some more polynomials today. We're going to look at multiplying. All right. Multiplying a monomial with another monomial. So remember, monomial means a single term. So this guy up front is a monomial. This is a single term he's multiplying with. That's another monomial. So multiplying them together is a single action calculation. There's one to multiply with another one. That's it. Let's look at that. Okay, step one I've got over here on the right. Just multiply those coefficients. There's nothing going on there that's out of the ordinary. I can't quite fit the S. Okay, so we've got that -4 and 7. That's just -28. Straight up multiplication like you'd always do. Step two. Combine the variables. And remember, if they're common bases, it just means to add the exponents. That's from last unit. Nice how that works out, huh? That quiz you just took, those skills you just learned, get to apply them right here. So I've got my x squared y cubed, and I've got an x y to the 5th. We're going to put those guys together. 2 on the x with the invisible 1 on the other x is x to the 3rd. Y to the 3rd, y to the 5th becomes y to the 8th. And that's it. There you go. Okay, multiply those coefficients, watch your negatives, and then you're just combining those common bases, which means adding those exponents on them. All right, let's look at this second one. Does that look tough, a little over the top? Because it's not. It's very easy stuff. We've got our -12 and our -3, which makes positive 36. Now we'll start working with all of our variables. I've got a single p there and a single p there, so that's going to be a p squared. Remember, they have the invisible 1. Got a q4 here and a q7, so it's going to be a q11. Add those guys together. Finally, I've got 9 r's here, r to the 9th, no r's in the other monomial. So that r9 just carries over. And there we go. This problem looks like it's sponsored by Google. All right. You guys try those. I'll come behind you in a minute and do them as well. Go. All right, let's dive in. Start with your coefficients. -9 times 4 is -36. I know some of you just wrote -32. Go fix that. 9 times 4 is 36. Next, I've got some x's. X cubed and a single x makes an x to the 4th. Y to the 5th and a y to the 7th. Add those together is a y12. All right, 8 times nothing. Remember, there is something there, the invisible 1. So 8 times 1, 8. P5 and a P7, P12. Q and Q, they both have the invisible 1. That is a Q squared. And finally, I've got an R to the 4 there with nothing else to combine with, so he still goes over to that answer. All right, one more time. Let's do it again. -7 times 6, -42. 7 and 1 makes 8 A's. 5 B's, 13 B's is 18 B's. And we've got 9 C's and 4 C's, 13 C's. There you go. Okay, now let's 2 on monomial times a polynomial. Okay, and remember, we still have to consider standard form. That's going to come back in because there's multiple terms. So make sure things are ordered correctly. All right, we already know this process. You guys already know how to do this. It's called distributing. So this -6x is going to get multiplied 3 times with the terms inside because there's 1, 2, 3 terms inside. So because there's 3 terms inside, there's 3 arrows across the top. The 3 arrows across the top are telling us we need to multiply negative 6x with each of those 3. So we're going to do what we did on the last page 3 times. That's all there is to it. So negative 6 times 4, negative 24. X times the x cubed, x to the 4. We just move on to the next term. Negative 6x times negative 5. 2 negatives cancel to positive 30. X times y, x, y. So notice that if you're multiplying variables that aren't like, that's okay. It works with multiplication. You just stick them together. X times y is x, y. And negative 6 times 7, negative 42. You're not done here. Don't stop there. Remember, you've got to include that x. He was part of that negative 6 term that's multiplying or distributing, so make sure he's also part of the answer. A good way to check when you finish these type of things, these type of problems, I see with kids when they're first learning, is if I have an x out here, every single thing I get for an answer better have at least a single x in it because he's multiplying and distributing through every one of those terms. So that's a good check when you're done with the problem. Whatever's out front, at a minimum, there needs to be one x in every single term's answer. Okay? All right. And then check, we are in standard form here. Let's double check. We've got our raised to the 4th exponent and then just single exponents. So we are in standard form. We're good. All right. Over here on the right, I've got those instructions. I meant to color code, but clearly I didn't follow. Multiply your coefficients. Next, combine your variables. And we add exponents of like variables. We just saw that on number 1. So let's do this second problem. Now, notice here, the distributing single monomial is on the back. That's perfectly fine. It doesn't change anything. There's no difference between problem number 1 up top and number 2 here. The parentheses tell us that these two have to multiply. And if they're multiplying with each other, and there's 3 things in here to multiply, there has to be 3 arrows, and we're going to do multiplication 3 times. So this distributing principle is exactly the same front or back, and even if the second term has parentheses, or like the first problem it doesn't matter. That negative 6x is right up against the parentheses, so is the 5pqr on the second problem. Okay, so it's going to be a distributing problem both ways. Just going to do that 3 times. So we've got 5 times that negative 9, negative 45. And I've got a PQR with a P squared. So that's going to be a P3. And then that QR just have to be copied in because they are part of that distributing term. 5 times that negative 7, negative 35. And there's nothing there for variables, so I just copy over the PQR. 8 times that 5 plus 40. And again, the Q's and the R's, those are going to add together. So P's, there's just one P. Q, there's 2 Q's, so Q squared. R's, there's 2 R's, so R squared. Now let's double check. Are we in standard form? Yep. Highest exponent. No, actually we're not. Highest exponent is first. But right now we have squareds second, so we do need to rewrite this guy. It should be negative 45. P cubed, QR, and now the plus 40 goes next because he's got more exponents. And now that middle term goes last, and we're going to need some room to fit him in. Minus 35 PQR. Okay, now it's correct. Now it's in standard form. And the other thing we can check and make sure of is that because PQR was what was distributing through, every single answer should have at least a PQR in it if I'm going to make sure I'm correct, and they all do. So that way to check shows us that at least that part was correct. Right here at the bottom, remember, multiplying and dividing do not require like terms. Okay, notice this idea of like terms is not happening with multiplication. This PQR on number 2 can multiply with any of the terms in number 2, even though none of them are like. Multiplication is creating some new quantity. So you don't have to worry about the idea of like terms. Like terms is when you're adding things, you have to add things of like type. You're just counting how many of that item you have. Multiplying is creating new quantities. No issue. Don't have to worry about like terms. Oh, okay. There's a couple for you. Give them a shot. Remember to write your answers in standard form. Go. Okay, let's look at this. There's 2 terms, therefore we distribute twice. We've got a negative 28. We've got an x squared and an x makes an x cubed. And then the y, the text on the end. Now I've got the negative 7 times the negative 3. Positive 21, the 2 negatives cancel. There's nothing on the 3, so we just need to make sure we don't leave behind that x squared. That goes to our answer. And we are in standard form because the highest variable is in the front. Or excuse me, the highest exponent. All right, number 2. Same idea, distribute 3 times. So I've got negative 30, x 10, and then that single y. Next one, 5 times 5 is 25, and then x 4, and then y and y squared makes y 3. Next one, 5 times negative 8, negative 40, and there's nothing here, so we just need to make sure not to forget those guys. Copy those onto that last term. X 4 to the y, and yep, we're good to go for standard form. Highest exponent's in the front, and the other 2 are both to the 4th. So I'd probably put this guy second since he's also got a 3rd, but technically I wouldn't care. Either of those were in front of those 2. They're both to the 4th, so I'd be fine. All right. What if we now put together Thursday's lesson, yesterday, and today's lesson? Distribute and then simplify, so combine any like terms you create after you multiply through. Okay, pretty simple. Here, I'm distributing this term to the other 2. Now notice, the negative 3x is a distributing term, or monomial. Okay, he's up against the parentheses. He's only going to those 2 guys right here in the parentheses next to him. Then we've got another distributing monomial, this plus 2, because he's up against the second set of parentheses. He's distributing into this second polynomial. Okay, so basically it's as if we just had 2 totally separate problems there, 2 separate little distributing problems. But because there's a plus 2 that's connecting them, once we're done, it's also a simplify. Put everything together that's any like terms you find. All right, so let's do that. Negative 3 times 4, we got that negative 12. Put all of those x's, x and x squared together makes x3. Negative 3 times negative 5 is plus 15 xy. We'll switch colors just to keep things clear, and now we're going to this second piece. 2 times 5, positive 10 x cubed. 2 times negative 7 minus 14y. And now we'd be done if it was just the distributing, but now we can look for any like terms. So to start, I've got some x cubes, and there are some other x cubes, so I can put those together. Now they're not going to cancel out, so we're going to have some amount of x cubes in a minute. Negative 12 plus 10, negative 2. Now let's see, I've got some xy's, and I'm going to cross these guys out just so I keep track of what I've already used. 15xy, there are no other xy's, so I'm just going to tack him onto the answer. And then last, I've got a minus 14y, and again, there are none of those, so I'm just going to tack that onto the answer. And I've gone through and used all my terms, and it is in standard form. Looks good. I'm done. Here's one more for you. I'll just do it again real quick. Okay, I'm going to distribute this guy. 3 terms on the inside of the parentheses means 3 times distributing. -6 times 2, -12. Now I just count up those variables. 3x's and 2x's is 5 total. Y, oh, notice I just made a mistake. I was going too fast. There's nothing above that x. The squared is on the y. So I got to slow down here. x3 and an x is x4. Then I've got the y, and the y squared is y3. Now I've got -6 times -7, positive 42. x3 and x is an x4. I don't know why the screen does that, guys. Sorry. Y squared, and then we've got the 8 times that -6 is -48. And since there's nothing on the 8, we're just copying down our x cubed y. All right, front half's done. Notice on the second half, there's a negative there, which brings in yesterday's lesson. We are just distributing the negative. It's exactly the same idea. It's a distributing type problem. We just need to copy those terms down with their sign flipped. So we've got a minus 3x to the 4th y squared, and then also a minus x to the 4th y cubed. Okay, there we go. All the distributing was done. All we've got left is any like terms, so we just go back through and look for them. Are there any x4 y3s? Yep, there's one way at the end. So -12 and -nothing, remember that's the -1, is -13 of the x4 y3s. And we've used them, so I'm going to cross them out to keep track of things. Next I'll look for some x4 y2s. And there's one right there. 42 minus 3, it's going to be 39 of the x4 y2s. Used those guys, used those guys. All I've got left is that one term, so I'll just copy into the answer. Minus 48 x cubed y. Check and see descending order. Yep, we're good. 4 in the front, and he's got a 3, so we probably would go over the other 4 with a 2. And the 3 exponents in the back, so we're good. We're in standard form. And there you go. You knew it was coming. There's your 2 practice problems. Go. All right, let's do this. I'm distributing, and I've got a -20 x squared minus 8 times 4, 32x. I'm going to do the same thing here. -18x minus 20x squared. Details, details, guys. It's all for naught. If when you're working through here, you multiply wrong, you miss a negative, you've got to double check your work. Some of you would need to triple check your work to make sure you're not making those simple errors. There's no way around that. You just have to do the work if you want to make sure to keep things correct. And eventually, if you keep practicing, it won't take triple checking. It'll only take double check. And if you do that often enough, you'll get them the first time most of the time. But you've got to put in the work. All right, we've got some x squareds, a -20 and another -20, -40x squared. Notice that is not an opposite pair to cancel. They're the same. 2 groups of -20 adds to -40. They're not going to cancel each other. Okay, next. I've got some x's and some x's. And those are just bad guys and bad guys. So I'm going to have a large group of x's. 32 and 18, -50. And that's in standard form. The higher exponents first. There you go. Let's do that other one. Okay, we've got a -15 x6 y squared. And a -6 x5 y. And then lastly, we've got the 21 x4 y. Now it's just a negative distributing. So it's a negative x5y and a -4 x4y. Now you just need to look for any like terms, and we'll be done. Do I have any x6, y2s? Nope. So we'll just copy that down. Any x5, y's? Yep, 1 right there. So -6 and -1 is -7 x5y. Used those guys. And some x4y's. Yep, 2 groups of x4y. 21 minus 4 is positive 17 x4y. Check standard form. Yep, 654 on our exponents. We're good. There you go. All right. There you go. Practice problems homework. Only 4 of them because I know they take some time. There you go. Kind of progress through from easier to harder, but even at the bottom they're not hard. They're just watching the details. All right. See ya.